Shopify grows with your business no matter how far or big you grow. From the launch your online shop stage to the first real-life store stage, all the way to the did we just hit 1 million orders stage? Shopify is there to help you grow. Whether you're selling your fans' next favorite shirt or an exclusive piece of podcast merch, Shopify helps you sell everywhere. From their all-in-one e-commerce platform to their in-person POS system, wherever and whatever you're selling, Shopify's got you covered. Sign up for a $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/income, all lowercase. Go to shopify.com/income to grow your business no matter what stage you're in.
Welcome to Accelerate Your Business Growth, where we're exploring all sorts of business topics. Experts from around the world join me, your host, Diane Helbig, for a conversation where they share their expertise with all of you. Take what you need when you need it. Featured on Inc.com, Forbes, and MSNBC's Your Business, this podcast is recognized as one of the best podcasts for small business, sales, leadership, social media, and more. When it comes to business, Accelerate Your Business Growth has got it covered. And now on with the show. My guest today is Mischa Zvegintzov. Mischa is a seasoned sales expert who once retired to teach yoga and be a stay-at-home dad. Now is the founder of the Influence Army and host of the Table Rush Talk Show, which I had the honor of recording an episode on. I know, right? He helps heart-centered entrepreneurs amplify their message and build influence without costly advertising. Thanks so much for joining me today, Mischa.
Diane, it is a pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me. And yes, we had a ton of fun with you on my podcast as well. So
that we did. So, turnabout is fair play. So we're going to have a lot of fun over here, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So we're going to talk about influence, right? And how we can create that without a lot of, costly advertising. But let's start with podcasting, being a podcast guest, especially since, both of us are hosts, but are also guests. So talk to me about the 7 benefits of podcast guesting.
Amazing. I'd love to. And before I go down the 7 benefits, I do want to say I personally, in my online marketing journey, wanting to grow my impact, grow my influence, grow my income, and break through my normal social circles, including my social media circles, because it can be a challenge to break through those as well, right?
Yeah.
I was watching, I've been in all sorts of masterminds and traveled the world and masterminds and, all this stuff, Zoom calls, hot seats. I saw so many people throwing so much money at social media marketing as a way to try to grow. But most people that I see run out of money before they're able to become ROI positive. Right?
Yeah, right. Because that's a long haul, right? You can't just do it and expect instant success.
That's it. It's a long haul. And I think this is not one of the 7 listed benefits, but it is a side benefit of podcast guest speaking, is you get to start to learn more about the languaging that you can use when it finally comes time to run ads.
Wow,
right?
That's great. I wouldn't have thought of that.
Yeah.
That's right. You sort of get to practice the way you communicate your area of expertise.
Absolutely. And oftentimes the host that we're talking to has customers or a customer base or knows people that need what we have. So they're in tune with the languaging and we can learn from that so we can learn what are the customer pain points more specifically that I need to be speaking to. What are the benefits that are actually going to resonate with my audience so when I'm running those ads, things like that. Yeah.
Wow. That's great.
Yeah. So anyway, I was horrified myself at I was like, I can't go down the social media marketing rabbit hole and spending all this money. Like I was horrified of it. And so podcast guest speaking, building organic opportunities, organic traffic is another way that people talk about this.
Yeah.
I was like, this is the way to do it. So why don't I go out there and get free traffic, leverage other people's audiences? Yes. Okay, good. So just to set up the
Yeah,
frame,
it's great.
right?
Sure.
Yeah, cool. So the 7 benefits are, the first one is obvious, or to me it's the most obvious, and that's the call to action. So we have a great conversation, and at the end, or perhaps somewhere within our conversation, you go, "Oh my gosh, Mischa, where can my audience find you if they want to learn more?"
Yes.
So I like to have a good call to action that's very specific. So for me, I say, hey, go to guestingguide.com, go to guestingguide.com, and you can get my, my comprehensive guide on how to run and execute a profitable podcast guest speaking tour. Right. So that's one benefit. You can point people to a specific offer. Or let's say you just want to create exposure. So you say, hey, go to, LinkedIn /Mischa Z, or just Google me on LinkedIn, Mischa Z, right? Mischa Zvegintzov. So the call to action. The next thing is number 2 is the host will sometimes direct recommend you to somebody. So we're having this great conversation. And Diane, you might literally at the end go, oh my gosh, Mischa, I know somebody who would love working with you. They need to get their word out. Can I make an introduction?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I have a membership. It's called the Influence Army. And I teach people how to go on an influence tour, which all starts by guest speaking on podcasts. Some of those members that are in there have been recommended to me by a host. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
All right. You see how I'm sneakily talking about my stuff too, or not so sneakily.
Not so sneakily, but yes.
Yes.
But they're great examples of how this works. So.
Yes. And then the host oftentimes will go, not all the time, but sometimes goes, oh my gosh, I want to go on a podcast tour, or I want what you have to offer, as the speaker. And so some of the people in my influence army are hosts who had me on, and they want to be in what I do. And so interestingly, when I'm out there pitching myself to get on shows, a lot of times we get on a show because someone is literally interested in what we do and they want to learn more about it. Right?
Yeah.
So it's a natural opportunity. So that's 3. Number 4, there's the collaboration opportunities. So we get an opportunity to teach into somebody's group, or maybe I am doing a master class on how to get speak on podcasts is coming up. And so some of the people that I have spoken on their podcast are like, man, can we share that? Can I share that on a deeper level with my audience? So over and above me speaking on the podcast, perhaps they'll share that with their email list.
Got it.
Right? Okay. So that's collaboration opportunities. I literally am speaking into someone's group at the end of the month. I spoke on their podcast. They're like, and I ask. So I proactively ask too. I'm like, hey, right? So you got to, sometimes it'll organically come up, but so I'm speaking into some people's live audiences at the end of the month. So collaboration opportunities. There's number 5 is the opportunity to repurpose the content. So before we started here, you said to me, hey, Mischa, by the way, this is just audio. And what did I ask you?
Can I record it?
Can I record it?
So I
Because I'm
can
going to
make
make a whole
snippets.
bunch of fun.
Yeah.
Yep. I'm going to make snippets. Right. And so if you go to my LinkedIn, anybody watching, excuse me, listening, can go to LinkedIn and find me, Mischa Zvegintzov. You will see I'm constantly posting little clips, social
Got it.
proof of what I do.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
All right. Um, the branding. So this year, the first quarter of the year, I've guest spoken on 20 podcasts.
Wow.
Yeah,
That's a lot.
it's a lot. Imagine like that just elevates my brand. Like
Yeah.
people will, yeah. So it's just branding, great branding over and above maybe people going to call to action or partnership opportunities or whatever. My name is getting out there, right? So good branding. The that's six, seven is SEO, search engine optimization. So podcasting, podcast episodes tend to have a longer shelf life than most of the social media marketing that people are doing.
Got it.
Right. So I am on all sorts of long form content out there that people can find via Google search and all this kind of stuff.
Sure.
Right? And as well as a lot of people will post their podcast episodes on YouTube. So there's
Yeah.
also, I'm on YouTube, right? So sometimes if you literally Google my name, you'll find all sorts of great content out there. If you
Yeah.
start Googling podcast guest speaking and things like that, long form content that I'm a part of rises to the
Right.
top. Does that make
Right.
sense?
Right.
Yeah.
Wow.
And then I got one more. You got a
What
question.
is
I'll
it?
give you a bonus eighth.
Great.
You will transform anybody who's like, I want to guest speak on podcasts and they commit to it.
Yeah.
And let's say you're like, yes, I want to speak on 20 podcasts in the first quarter of the year. You will be a different person by the end of that journey. Like you will have a transformation. You will be a better storyteller. You will most likely have weeded out lots of the ums and ahs. Your business will transform. Anyway, there you go.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. Yes. Those are great. Those are great. And when you were talking about collaboration, I was thinking, like in my case, what I've noticed is I some of the best business relationships I have are because of people who guested on my podcast. And there was a synergy and a resonance. And so we've just kept building that relationship over time, right? Because there's just somehow the connection is really good. It doesn't happen with all guests, but that's part of the value of it is you expand a really good network of people you want to be around.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yes. And you were great on my show. Hopefully when we're done here, you'll be like, that was awesome. And, we have a little bit of crossover in what we do. As far as helping people build their businesses online, things like that,
Sure.
your business coaching, but we have enough separate that we could really serve each other's audiences.
Exactly. That's right. Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Yep. I totally feel that. Okay. So someone's listening and they're like, wow, yeah, I want to do this thing. How do they find podcasts that have their audience?
Yeah, that's such a great question. And naturally, I think when people hear podcast guest speaking, their brain goes, well, of course, I want to speak on Joe Rogan's podcast or Seth Rogen's podcast or all these giant podcasts or anybody in your niche.
Yeah.
And that's not realistic yet. We have to build the resume till at some point their agent reaches out to us.
Right. Exactly.
So let's dive into the perfect audience for a second.
Yes.
So I like to frame it this way first, because this is the way I heard it and it hit home to me so hard. And Ron Story asked me this question. Ron Story, he's just gifted at helping people, speak on stages and all this stuff. But Ron Story said to me, he goes, hey, Mischa, he goes, stop worrying about the podcast you're getting on. He goes, if you right now could go speak to a captive audience of 10 people about what you do, would you do it? And I was like, of course. And he goes, so don't worry about the size of the podcast.
Mm.
Right. So if you think about it, let's say we've got a podcast that has 100 engaged listeners. And what I do, if someone said you can stand up in front of 100 people, I would do it all day, every day.
Right.
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 And then, yeah. And then realistically, I'm just looking for a slice of that audience that resonates.
Sure.
So, right. So it doesn't need to be all of it. It could be 10 people. It just needs to be 10 of that 100.
Right.
Right. So if we think of it that way, so for me, podcast guest speaking, who I could speak on entrepreneur podcasts, I could speak on coaching podcasts, I could speak on founder podcasts, I could speak on tech-centered podcasts, because a slice of the people who are listening to tech-centered podcasts are going to be have tech that they want to bring to the market, right?
Right.
And so it would serve them to know how to guest speak on podcasts to get the message out. So if I'm willing to expand a little bit, we could also say there's so many, and God bless, Christian centered podcasts out there right now. So there's like Christian entrepreneur podcasts, Christian mom podcasts, like all these different sort of podcasts. And I don't know why that came to mind, maybe because I keep running into them, but a lot of those audience would be served by hearing me talk to them how to get speak on podcasts. So does that make sense?
It does. Yeah, it does. The flip side of that, I think, and I think something that people need to pay attention to is really researching the podcast as far as who they're looking for, right? And the kinds of, what that content is like. Because I know for me, I'm very specific about what I talk to my guests about and what I don't talk to my guests about. And yet I have people reach out and pitch me about things I do not talk to my guests about. And I say, no, thank you. And I just think, it says it right there. Like I'm very clear because I'm respecting my audience, right? That they know this is what you're going to get. You're going to get education. This is who it's for. This is what you're going to get, that kind of thing. So I do think people need to be careful. And so I'm wondering what you think about this, about just, wildly pitching or really doing their homework.
Yeah, I will give you, I think both serve. Okay. So how do we find podcasts? That was your initial question. And I'll answer the question you just said by talking about how we find podcasts. So you can simply start with Google. I know this sounds crazy or silly or whatever, but you could Google, like you're a business coach, correct?
Yes.
And you like to work with small businesses.
Right.
Right.
Yep.
So you could Google small business podcasts.
Yes.
Okay. You could also, I'm imagining coaching podcasts. There's going to be a slice of coaching podcasts that would be really good for you to speak on.
Sure.
Motivational podcasts, any sort of motivational podcast, because a lot of people oftentimes that are looking for motivation or looking for mindset. So we could Google mindset podcasts, are people in the entrepreneur space looking for that support to help them make it through the slog.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
Because entrepreneuring can be hard.
Yes.
So you could literally Google, mindset podcasts, coaching podcasts, business coaching podcasts. You could Google Christian entrepreneur podcast, for example. I have no idea if you're Christian or not, but my guess is if you come with an open mind, you could probably serve a Christian-minded business podcast, right?
Yeah.
So you can just start Googling all these things, and Google will feed you, especially with AI now. I'm not sure if you've seen the Google search anymore. They've got their AI going with it. It's pretty cool.
I do.
But does that make sense? So that's
it does. Sure.
Simple way to cool.
Yeah.
The next thing you can do is you So that's a great way to go on your search, whatever search you like. You just search. You can then just go into Apple Podcasts. Same thing. You
Mhm.
could put coaching podcasts, mindset podcasts, and it's going to give you a list of them. Okay.
Okay.
Anybody listening, the next thing you do is you scroll down. You pick one that looks good, and then you scroll down, and it'll say other podcasts you might like are. This is where most people miss. Okay. It's
Yeah.
like it's feeding you. Apple's like, oh, you like this? We want to give you more. So you just scroll down a little bit in the podcast app and it'll give you a whole bunch more.
Wow.
Okay. You can do the same thing on Spotify.
Okay.
Okay. Um, Now, when you start a podcast that you want to speak on, so
Yeah.
your listeners right now like your podcast, they could hack your speaker list. It's the next thing you do is you hack the podcast speaker list. You find a podcast that has speakers, guest speakers. Most people guest speaking these days have their own show. I have my own show, the Table Rush Talk Show.
Huh. Uh-oh. Oh my God.
And yeah, and then what was I going to say? Realistically, they're like-minded in the space,
Yeah,
open-minded.
right.
Like it's okay. Then you go find them on Facebook or whatever their social media platform is of choice, and then you just stalk them. When I say stalk them,
Be very careful here.
I know. So realistically, a lot of people that are guest speaking on podcasts are putting themselves out there in other ways.
Uh-huh.
Find them on Facebook. They're probably on a summit or something, or guest speaking somewhere else. You go to that thing and there's a whole another 20 more people or a whole another 50 more people that high percentage amount of those people have a show that you can
Wow.
guest speak on. It's really crazy how much you can find really
No
quick,
kidding.
targeted to your audience,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. So you find them, and then it's like, oh, okay, well, how do we reach out to them? So that's the next question. Oh, but before we get into that, I want to
Yes.
say targeted and shotgun approach. So I always have 100 emails going out a month, more shotgun approach to podcasts.
Okay.
So just 100 going out, and then I'll get a response. It's like, yeah, I'd love to have you on my show. And then I do a little bit more research, and I'm like, oh, I might not be a good fit. Right? Realistically, I'll probably speak on it anyway, just
Okay.
because it's good and you never know, and opportunities. But sometimes people like you might reply and say, no, not interested. But what you can always do then is say, well, would you like to be on my show? Or you can come up with a counter offer or something like that. Or you get the next step, right? So I could email you shotgun style, I'd love to be on your show. And you reply back and you say, well, you better read this. And so then I read this, which is what I did with you. I was like, I
Yeah.
read this. And I was like, I would be a good guest for your show. So let's do it. Right. And at the
Which
same
was
time,
true. Yeah.
which was true. And at the same time, I did a counter offer. I
Yeah.
was like, well, hey, because I was like, I do want to speak on Diane's show and I want to make sure I speak on your show. Do
Aha.
you want to speak on my show? Right.
Got
So I was
it.
like, I want this one to happen. Okay. So you can
That is
strategically.
interesting. Yeah. Now that you say that, when people say I'd like to do a swap, if it makes sense to me, I am more likely to entertain them being on my podcast because it gives me an opportunity to be on theirs. That's really interesting.
Yeah. And it's win-win for everybody, right?
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I do a lot of shows that I will send an invite to. You're getting a few responses. You send an invite to a show. It's either yes, this rarely happens, but it's yes, fill out, book here. That's not the norm,
Yeah.
but it does happen. The other one is yes, and fill out this form. Yes, we'd love you to speak. Fill out this form and apply here.
Yeah.
right? So then
Yeah.
there's, or it's no, straight up no. That's just an opportunity for a counteroffer. So if you're committed to getting your word out there on podcasts, you could say, and you think the podcast is a good fit, you could say, oh, okay. Well, would you like to be on my show? Would be a counteroffer. Or, oh, do you offer advertising? Or, oh, do you, right? You can do a counteroffer because you've basically created engagement. And now you have an opportunity to grow something
Right.
if you want to.
Okay.
Or if they say no, I'll look and go, oh, well, I really did want to work with you anyway. So I've said with love, we're not a good fit. That's a better way to say
We're
it.
not a good fit.
We're
Thank
not a good
you.
fit. Um, I used to be a telemarketer back in the day and
Oh,
for sales, and I can handle rejection, and I'm like, no, great. Like you're I'm one step closer to the yes. Right? Like,
exactly.
but I understand millennials. It's the new world we're in. We have to be a little more. We're not a good fit, so that's fine. What was I going to say? Oh, the other response is literally a non-response, and
Oh,
so
yeah.
if you send out 100 emails, typically 10% are going to respond in some manner of yes, yes, and or no. And
Okay.
so engagement started, but then you've
Yeah.
got 90 that haven't responded. I literally just resend the same thing. I
Yeah.
just hit forward to those and say, hey, I just wanted to make sure you saw this. And
Yeah.
then it creates a new round of engagement. It's kind of a side note. But anyway, tactically, Russell Brunson's a great example of somebody who's big in online marketing line. Let's say I'm like, I really want to speak on Russell Brunson's podcast,
Mhm.
right? Or pick somebody who's big in your niche.
Yeah.
Of course, be more tactical. Listen to some shows. Give them a 5-star review. Think like, how can I add value to Russell and his audience? And so I'm going to make it really easy. I'm going to say, hey, I'd love to speak on your show. This is how I can serve your audience. Here's the name of a title. We could even call your show this. And here's 5 things we could talk about it, or we could call the episode this. Here's the
Yeah.
talking points. I
Yeah.
5-starred your show. Here's a picture of the review. I'd love to serve. Right. So that's a more tactical, which you're talking
Okay.
about, which is great. So I think I'm constantly have lots going out where I'm like, let's just get emails going out there because it's good habit. And then as I'm researching more people, so I'll look through your guest list and I'll go, oh, that's someone I really need to speak on their show. We have a great partnership opportunity. Let me be more tactical in
Got
my in
it.
my approach. Yeah.
Okay. All right. That all makes a lot of sense to me. I get it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Good.
Yeah.
Hopefully I didn't talk too long about that.
No, no, it's great because um one of the things I like about it is it's that activity that creates momentum, right?
Yeah.
So if you
Yes.
do too much of the one-offs, you don't get that energy going behind the whole thing.
Yeah.
So,
Um,
well, you just answered my next question. My next question is like, what do you say in the pitch? But what you just said about serving, making sure that you understand what their podcast is about, what they're looking for, that you've listened is helpful. So,
yeah,
is there anything else on that?
absolutely. And I would say 2 things. One, I've got very complex in my pitches, which can serve if they're tactical, but I will give you a pitch. I'm going to give a pitch to your audience that is so simple. Right now, I'm going to give it to you. That will get you booked on shows. I
Okay.
have used this pitch a lot, and when all else fails and I don't know what to say, I just cut and paste this. I
Okay.
swear to you. Okay.
Can't
Are you
wait.
ready?
I'm
This is
ready.
okay. Subject. So that's the name. Diane or whoever, podcast host. Hold on. Let me find it. Okay. I found your podcast name and you have a great show. Are you looking for interesting guests to be on the show? If so, what are the next steps?
I love that. I think someone just did that to me.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah, because you're just asking, okay, how do we play this game? Right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then oftentimes I'll get, well, is this for you or someone else? It's for me.
Uh,
What do you want to talk about? This is what I'd love to talk about. Right? Or no, I'm not looking for interesting
right.
guests. Okay,
Go away. Right.
go away. Fine. So I swear to you, I'm going to say it again so anybody listening doesn't
Yes.
have to hit rewind.
Yes.
Subject, that's the person. Diane, I found your podcast name and you have a great show. Are you looking for an interesting guest to be on the show? If so, what are the next steps? Somebody could just start with that, send, and it's gotten me on more shows. Right?
Yeah.
You just do the next indicated step when they respond. You
Yeah.
answer the question.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm only going to say one thing about this, and this is based on
Yeah.
my personal experience. Make sure you get the right podcast name. That's all I'm going to say. Because
Listen,
when you don't, I know you haven't listened to the podcast.
hey, so check this out. I'm looking at my template over here as we're talking, right? And
Yeah.
it says subject. So I need to cross that out and put in Diane, right?
Yeah, right.
And it says, I found your podcast name. That's where I would put in your podcast, Accelerate Your Business Growth Podcast, right?
Right.
I will, more than I'd like to admit, remember to just fill out those fields.
Yeah.
So it'll say subject. I'd like to be on insert your podcast name here. Oh my gosh.
Yeah. Right.
Yes. All right. I'll tell you how to find them. Go on. We can talk more to that, or if any questions.
No. We can go on. So, what would you say to someone who's listening who considers themselves an introvert? So, like, they get it that this is something they should be doing, but they're thinking to themselves, I don't. It's a big no.
Yeah, that's such a great question. And let me find my framework, because I have a framework for this. I have a framework for everything. And this is the show up as your best you blueprint.
Ooh.
Okay.
Yes.
And this is, my show up as your best you blueprint. My 3-step blueprint for, let me start over. My 3-step blueprint for instantly captivating any audience with unforgettable authenticity and magnetism, even if you're an introvert or have introvert tendencies. Okay, so hey, I'm charming as can be. I smile. I can tell a good story. And people are like, you came out of the womb this way.
Yeah.
No, I did not. I did not come out of the womb this way. I was shy. I got called out by a teacher in 7th or 8th grade. I'd have Mischa come up here and answer the question, but he'd probably start crying. Sure enough, they brought me up there. I started crying. Like, I was horrified.
That's a
Right?
terrible thing for a teacher to do.
It's terrible, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
Cold-blooded even. Yeah. They must have had a bad day, right? Like they must have
or they hated children, something. I don't know.
He should have been a parole officer.
Yes, exactly teacher. Right. They should be in the juvenile detention center. Okay.
Yeah. So I, at some point, got into sales, like I said, and telemarketing, door to door, stuff like that, and I've been doing this for a long time. So I'm going to date myself, but I used to listen to people like Zig Ziglar,
sure,
Brian Tracy. It's funny, Brian Tracy's kind of having a resurgence now. But anyway, back then in the 90s or earlier, those were the guys. And in the 2000s and basically smile. So here's the tips. Even if you're an introvert,
okay,
you smile or frown less, whichever way you'd look to look at it.
Okay.
Okay. So it's proven that when we smile, we bring better energy, and it literally changes our brain chemistry. Okay.
Okay.
And so, And so Zig Ziglar and all these guys were like, when you're telemarketing, smile on the phone because the energy, it transfers through. It just does. Okay. So if you're going to go on a podcast, you're going to do your best to smile or frown less, however you want to say it. Okay.
Got it. Okay. That's
Number
one.
number two
Yes.
is sit up straight and roll your shoulders back. So in sales, right, there was this big wave, and it's still the case. And entrepreneurs and people who are out there who are kicking butt, they have the stand-up desks.
Yes.
Right. It's like stand up. So the reason if you're in sales, you stand up is so it forces you, it helps you have better posture, which opens up your diaphragm. So you speak more powerfully is one way to say it, or your energy is better. Your shoulders are rolled back. So no one can see this, but I'll show you. So when I go to guest speak on a podcast, I swap out chairs and I put a stool down because it forces me to sit up straight, and I roll my shoulders back.
Got it.
And
Okay.
I'm more open, so I project better energy.
Right.
When we're on podcasts, we need to level up a little bit.
Uh-huh.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so that helps because in person, you're more, what do they say on TV or even on Broadway? Like you need to be like 30% more energetic.
Right.
Have you heard that stat out there?
Yes.
Yeah. So I'm giving you a very long answer, but this is number one, physical preparation. So one, smile. Two, sit up straight or stand up while on the call. Three, roll your shoulders back, lift your chest. These are going to be natural things. And again, if you're an introvert, just do it a little less. So look.
Do it a little less.
A little less. So, hey, I literally in the telemarketing days, I wrote smile in big font. I would print out smile in big font on pieces of paper and put it all over the place. Smile. Smile. It just makes such a big difference. So I can't reiterate that enough. Okay. Number two is emotional engagement. So there's 7 excitement, what I like to call your 7 excitement. So, McCall Jones taught me this, but basically it's when you come to a podcast, if you think of excitement on a scale of 1 to 10, in a perfect world, we would show up at our 7, right? Because if we're at a 10
right.
on our scales, so this is individually, right?
Yeah, right.
I'm going to be over the top and it's going to be too much.
Right.
Right. So you want your 7 excitement in a perfect world.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so what you do is comb through your life and think about the story, your 7-level excitement stories. Okay. So when I had my first baby, Cooper, well, when Dawn, the boy's mom, gave birth, she had the baby.
Who had the baby? Wait a minute.
When I was a part of the process.
Yes.
That might be
the birth of your first child. Yes.
That might be a 10. That might be too much, right?
Yes.
So, however, when I first started my podcast, there was a guy out there. His name was Matthew Cox. And I was in the home loan business for a long time. And he was on the FBI's most wanted list for mortgage fraud, went into prison, got out, and has just this amazing tale. And I was like, I need this guy on my podcast, right? Yeah. And it was the first time that I was inviting somebody outside of my circle. Right. So it's like, hey, Matthew, I saw you on the Minimalist podcast. I don't know if you've heard of the Minimalist podcast, but it's giant. Their YouTube channels like got 1 million followers or something ridiculous. So I was like, is this guy would he even be willing? Doesn't matter. I sent the email. He replied, yes.
Nice.
Right. And I was like, oh my gosh. But then I also had the clarity of like, well, he said yes. That's like a girl saying yes or a guy saying yes when you ask him on a date. You actually got to get him to the date, right? So I realized the chase was on. In a moment, I was like, this is amazing. And then I was like, oh no, the chase is on now. But anyway, you see how I told that story and I get a little bit animated. So what you do before you get on a podcast is literally speak that story. Speak your 7 stories. So come up with a few 7-level stories And then you tell that story to yourself and it brings you back. Like my heart is beating, right? I can feel it beating, and it elevates you to that
Yeah.
seven
Your
level, right?
energy level.
Yeah. And so you show up with bigger energy.
Yeah.
So that's a little
Huh.
trip, just a secret.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Number 3 is I have spiritual centering, and you can say this all kinds of different ways,
Sure.
but I say a little prayer or mantra before I jump on. I'm like, God, universe, source, whatever you want to say.
Right. Right.
Like, how can I be of service? Like, how can I serve Diane and her audience? Right?
Yeah.
Gets me in the
Yeah. Right. In the right frame
right
of mind. Yeah.
right
Yeah.
frame of
Yeah.
mind. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, so there you go. Now, when it comes to being an introvert, right? All of this said, we're not trying to have you introverts be anything different than you
Yeah.
are,
Right.
right? If you
Yes.
want to show up with your hoodie and sunglasses on, show up with your hoodie and sunglasses on,
Yeah. Right.
right? That's your
Yeah.
audience is going to resonate with that,
Right.
right? We're
Yes.
just trying to get in the right mindset,
Right.
maybe like frown a little less.
Yeah. That's my favorite now.
Yes. Um, and so that's my big tip for the introverts is like, if you're at a 1 level all the time and you get
Yeah.
to a 2 level, amazing. Do it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
There's
Sure.
no pressure to be anybody you're not.
Right. Boy, that's the key. Right.
That's the key.
Just be
Yeah.
you, but be comfortable being you,
Yeah.
and do some of these or even one of these to help elevate that a little bit. So that's what comes across.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It's great.
Okay.
You
Yeah.
know, we could go on, but we can't because
Yes.
like to respect the audience with having these be a certain length, but and really because people need to reach out to you because
Yeah.
you add so much value for people who, A, they should be going down this road, and B, you just have such a great system and process for them to be able to successfully go down this road. So will you share with the listeners again how they can find you and
Yes.
your call to action?
Indeed. Guestingguide.com. Anybody listening, go to guestingguide.com and you can get my PDF on how to execute a profitable podcast, a profitable and successful podcast guest speaking tour. Of course, you're going to have to give me your email, but the value you'll get will be more than worth it. And then LinkedIn.com. I love LinkedIn. I'm just having so much fun on LinkedIn right now. So Mischa Z, Mischaz, Mischaz is my LinkedIn handle. But there you go. Those are the 2 places. Yeah.
Thank you. I'll make sure that's all in the show notes. So
Perfect.
thank you so much for doing this. I really appreciate you.
Indeed. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. And listeners, thank you. You are who we're doing this for. All right, that's it. Thank you for tuning in to this episode of Accelerate Your Business Growth, a production of Evergreen Podcasts. Discover more episodes of this podcast and explore others at evergreenpodcast.com. As always, continue to prosper and be curious. And if you're looking to get your sales strategy headed in the right direction, pick up a copy of Succeed Without Selling on Amazon or wherever books are sold. Until we meet again on another episode of Accelerate Your Business Growth, goodbye and good day.
Do you love news about LinkedIn, Indeed, Google, and just about every other recruitment tech company out there?
Hell yeah. I'm Chad.
I'm Cheese.
We're the Chad and Cheese Podcast.
All the latest recruiting news and insights are on our show.
Dripping in snark and attitude.
Subscribe today wherever you listen to your podcasts.
We out.